They burned my orchard during a county fire ban and thought they'd won. I'm Ezra, retired firefighter standing in a silent field of ash where 120 heritage apple trees once stood, 20 years of my life, planted with my late wife's hands, now reduced to warm charcoal under my boots. The morning air hangs heavy with diesel and scorched wood. Across the street, $5 million McMansions gleam untouched. Yesterday, HOA President Karen Whitfield stood on her porch in silk pajamas, sipping a $7 latte, smiling as county workers dropped torches. Big mistake. Never burn a firefighter's legacy when your own cul-de-sac is a code violation tinderbox. 6 months later, I'm sinking new saplings into rich black soil while Karen's designer palace is twisted rebar and regret. Fire doesn't follow HOA rules. It just comes home. What would you do if they torched your life's work? Where are you watching from? Drop your worst HOA nightmare below. I'm reading everyone. 15 years ago, I bought 3 acres in what used to be Willowbrook Farms. Real farmland with soil so black and rich it stuck to your boots like chocolate cake batter. My wife Sarah and I had this crazy dream. Heritage apple orchard, heirloom varieties you can't buy in stores. We planted 120 trees with our own hands. Gravenstein, Arkansas Black, Esopus Spitzenberg. Sarah researched every variety while I dug holes until my back screamed. The satisfying thunk of applewood stakes hitting packed earth, the sweet smell of fresh mulch on summer mornings. That was our paradise. Then developers moved in, slapped down McMansions worth $800,000 each, complete with HOA rules thicker than a phone book. I was grandfathered in, my property predated their precious covenants. Enter Karen Whitfield. Real estate agent married to City Councilman Bradley, moved in 5 years ago in a house so white it looked like a dental office. The kind of woman who calls cops on Mexican landscapers for loitering but never mentions the white contractors. Her first complaint, my compost smelled ethnic. Yeah, Karen, decomposing apple peels smell like agriculture. Shocking discovery. Then came citations for excessive truck traffic, 4 pickups during harvest season. Apparently, anything louder than her silent Tesla violated her delicate sensibilities. She measured my grass with an actual ruler, photographed my mailbox for being 3 inches off center, and once called a city inspector because my garden hose was industrial green instead of suburban beige. But her biggest issue? My trees blocked her $1 million mountain view. This neighborhood has standards, she told me last spring, standing at my fence in tennis whites that cost more than my truck payment. Maybe it's time you considered what's best for people who actually contribute to property values. People who actually contribute. Like growing food was somehow less valuable than selling overpriced houses to tech bros. Sarah died 3 years ago. Cancer. Karen knew this. Sent a fruit basket and everything. Didn't stop her from ramping up pressure 6 months later. Then came county fire restrictions, standard Oregon summer stuff, but Karen saw opportunity. Called an emergency HOA meeting, didn't invite the guy with actual firefighting experience, and declared my orchard an imminent hazard. Mature apple orchards suppress fires, not spread them. But Karen wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in my land. Karen didn't waste time. Within 48 hours of her secret HOA meeting, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. The paper still smelled like fresh ink when I tore it open. 72-hour notice for emergency vegetation removal from something called Precision Tree Service. I dialed the number, got a recording that made my jaw clench. Thank you for calling Bradley's Emergency Services. Her own husband's company. The woman had brass, I'll give her that. The work order was bureaucratic poetry. Remove all vegetation within 50 feet of neighboring structures per county fire ordinance 847B. I'd memorized fire codes for 30 years, never heard of 847B. Off to the county building I went, that soul-crushing beige temple where hope goes to die in triplicate. The clerk behind bulletproof glass couldn't find Ordinance 847B anywhere in the system. Turns out it only applied to undeveloped wildland, not agricultural property. During my firefighting days, I'd learned that ag land has completely different fire requirements than residential zones. Karen's legal foundation was quicksand. My lawyer filed an emergency injunction faster than you could say judicial misconduct. Judge Martinez granted a temporary restraining order, no tree cutting until proper hearings. I was sipping a victory beer on my porch when Mrs. Haven appeared at my fence, looking like she'd swallowed a wasp. "Ezra," she whispered, eyes darting toward Karen's house. "Bradley was on his phone yesterday. Something about golf with the judge at 9 a.m. My beer suddenly tasted like ash. Bradley belonged to Willowbrook Country Club. So did Judge Martinez. Next morning brought news that hit like a sledgehammer. My TRO had expired due to clerical error. The court clerk, 20-year veteran who'd never made a filing mistake, suddenly couldn't read calendar dates. What were the mathematical odds of that coincidence? Time to fight fire with fire. I called Channel 8 News, pitched them a story that would make their ratings department weep with joy. Retired firefighter battles corrupt HOA using illegal court connections. When the news crew arrived Wednesday afternoon, their equipment cases thumped against my front steps like distant thunder. Reporter Jennifer Walsh had sharp eyes and sharper questions. I walked her through my orchard, showed her the bogus ordinances, the mysteriously vanishing court orders. Our viewers eat these David versus Goliath stories alive, she said, camera capturing the late afternoon light filtering through my apple leaves. The story aired Tuesday evening, 6 minutes of pure vindication. Agricultural experts explaining how mature orchards suppress fire spread, my old fire chief calling Karen's claims scientifically baseless. Karen's Facebook counterattack hit within hours, carefully cropped photos of winter pruning cuts that looked dangerous to untrained eyes, posts about stubborn residents endangering families. But I'd learned something about social media warfare. My response went up Wednesday morning, the full news segment with this caption: "When HOA presidents lie about fire safety, neighbors deserve the truth." 200 shares in 4 hours. Comments poured in from neighbors I'd never met, sharing their own Karen horror stories. Her carefully crafted narrative imploded like a controlled demolition. That's when Karen made her biggest mistake. Thursday at dawn, chainsaw engines roared to life across my property line. I bolted from bed at 6 a.m. to the mechanical scream of industrial chainsaws. Through my window, I watched 6 men in hard hats systematically destroying 20 years of my life. The sweet morning air I'd breathed for decades now reeked of diesel exhaust and flying sawdust that stuck to my skin like grief. Karen stood at the property line in her silk robe, coffee steaming in a porcelain cup, conducting this symphony of destruction. When she spotted me stumbling outside in my bathrobe, she actually waved like we were old friends meeting at a barbecue. "Safety first, Ezra," she chirped over the chainsaw noise. "County orders." The crew foreman looked miserable, the kind of guy who'd rather be cutting actual dangerous trees instead of someone's life work. "Lady says the court order got reinstated," he mumbled, showing me a clipboard thick with official-looking papers. "We're just following county fire marshal directions." I knew every fire marshal in 3 counties. None had visited my property since Bush was president, the first one. By noon, 120 apple trees were gone. The crew piled wood chips into a mountain and set it ablaze during a county fire ban. Black smoke billowed across the neighborhood while the crackling sound of burning apple wood, trees Sarah and I had planted with such hope, made my chest feel carved out with a rusty spoon. That's when I got smart instead of mad. Phone out, documenting everything. The illegal burn, license plates, Karen's satisfied smile as my legacy turned to ash. When volunteer firefighters finally arrived, Battalion Chief Tommy Rodriguez, who'd worked under me for 15 years, went pale. "Ezra, who authorized this burn?" Karen materialized with her magic folder. "Agricultural waste exemption," she announced, waving papers that looked official if you squinted and had never seen real permits. Tommy read the document, eyebrows climbing. "Ma'am, this exemption applies to crop residue, not living trees. Plus it requires advanced state forestry permitting." During my firefighting career, I'd seen agricultural burn permits. They're specific as surgical instructions, exact dates, weather conditions, moisture levels. Karen's document had the legal authority of a grocery list, but my trees were already ash. Friday morning, I ordered an emergency property survey. $800 I couldn't afford, but my gut screamed something was wrong beyond the obvious. The surveyor arrived with GPS equipment that NASA would envy. 4 hours later, he handed me a report that made my hands shake. "Mr. Thornfield, that tree service cut 15 feet into city property. Protected wetlands buffer zone. Environmental violations in Oregon carry $50,000 penalties per tree. The crew had destroyed 12 trees in the buffer zone. Quick math, $600,000 in fines, assuming anyone enforced environmental law anymore. Karen must have been glued to her window because within an hour, a different crew appeared with new survey stakes. Correcting measurement errors, they claimed. Property line adjustment. Property lines don't adjust like hemlines going out of style. When I called the original surveyor, his office said he'd left for a family emergency. His replacement would provide revised measurements for a consultation fee. The bribery was so obvious it insulted my intelligence. But I'd prepared for this. Hidden trail cameras don't lie. They'd captured the crew cutting past actual property lines, time-stamped with GPS coordinates that courts love. The cameras also recorded Karen handing the replacement surveyor an envelope thick enough to stuff a turkey. The real bombshell came from business license records. Precision Tree Service belonged to Mountain Vista Holdings, owned by Bradley Whitfield. Karen had used HOA emergency funds to pay her husband's company for environmental crimes on public land. Tuesday, I filed complaints with State Environmental Agency, County Prosecutor, and Ethics Board. Each included GPS evidence, photographs, and audio of Karen's bribery attempts. Karen's panic response was swift and stupid. A lawsuit claiming I'd filed frivolous complaints, demanding $50,000 in harassment damages. Good lawyers don't file lawsuits that ridiculous unless clients are holding guns to their heads. Karen was definitely losing her composure. Karen's frivolous lawsuit was like watching someone commit suicide by paperwork. Within days, the local newspaper ran the headline, HOA President Sues Firefighter Over Environmental Complaints. The optics were so toxic, hazmat teams should have been involved. But Karen doubled down with a PR blitz that would make North Korea jealous. HOA newsletters suddenly featured glossy spreads about fire safety achievements, complete with before and after photos of my decimated orchard. Property values had allegedly jumped 3% thanks to proactive vegetation management. Fresh printer ink filled every mailbox as Karen's propaganda machine cranked into overdrive. She got herself appointed to the County Fire Safety Board. Apparently, tree destruction qualified as expertise these days. Bradley announced his mayoral campaign that same week, campaigning on public safety while standing in the ashes of my life's work. I was drowning in legal bills that made my kitchen table groan under their weight. Documents rustled like autumn leaves every time the furnace kicked on. The silence where morning birds used to sing felt heavier than concrete. Then my insurance adjuster called with news that nearly knocked me off my chair. Mr. Thornfield, we're investigating fraud. Someone filed smoke damage claims the same day your trees burned. Karen had filed insurance claims for smoke damage to her house from the fire she'd ordered. The timestamp showed she'd filed before my trees were even cut. The woman's audacity could power a small city. Maria Santos, my adjuster, had 20 years sniffing out insurance scams. This suggests systematic fraud, she said, her voice tight with professional anger. Multiple properties in your area show suspicious patterns over 5 years. I spent the weekend playing insurance detective, cross-referencing Maria's data with public records. Every property showed identical patterns: manufactured emergencies, Bradley's companies swooping in for expensive solutions, convenient insurance payouts following mysterious damage. Monday brought Mrs. Haven to my door, carrying dumplings and a manila envelope with hands that trembled like fall leaves. Ezra, I can't sleep anymore. Karen forced me to sign papers saying your trees threaten my house. The envelope contained audio gold, Karen threatening to have Mrs. Haven's property tax assessment doubled if she didn't cooperate. City assessors listen when concerned neighbors report unpermitted additions, Karen's voice said clearly. Mrs. Haven's garage conversion had been unpermitted for 15 years. Nobody cared, until Karen needed ammunition. She threatened 6 other neighbors, Mrs. Haven whispered. Different violations, same message, cooperate or face consequences. Witness intimidation is a federal felony. Karen had apparently made it her hobby, but the real earthquake came when Maria called back. Mr. Thornfield, we've mapped the Whitfield network. 15 properties, $2.3 million in insurance payouts over 8 years. The scheme was brilliant. Create property crises, hire Bradley's companies for overpriced solutions, file insurance claims for collateral damage, pocket the difference. Repeat across multiple shell companies until you own half the neighborhood. My garage wall became a conspiracy theorist's dream. Red strings connecting properties, dates, payments, shell companies. It looked insane, but the math was undeniable. That's when Karen played her nuclear card. Thursday morning, foreclosure notice taped to my door. $50,000 in special assessments for fire safety improvements, plus 5 years of accumulated penalty fees. The math was pure fiction. Charges for improvements that didn't exist, penalties calculated at rates that violated state law. But Karen knew most people couldn't afford protracted legal battles, even when they were obviously right. She'd perfected this intimidation system over 5 years. What she hadn't anticipated was targeting someone with nothing left to lose and 30 years of emergency response experience. That foreclosure notice was Karen's fatal mistake. Threatening a man's home after destroying his livelihood? That's when survival instincts override social niceties, and 30 years of emergency training kicks into overdrive. I drove to the county archives, that basement tomb where democracy goes to decompose in manila folders. The air smelled like old paper and broken dreams, while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying insects. If Karen wanted legal warfare, I'd show her what real investigation looked like. What I found in those yellowed documents changed the entire game. Original Willowbrook HOA formation papers, filed 8 years ago. Karen's signature glared at me from incorporation documents dated 3 months before she'd allegedly moved here. Property records showed the Whitfields purchased their house 6 months after Karen had legally formed the HOA. You can't form an HOA for neighborhoods you don't live in. That's like running for mayor of cities you've never visited. The incorporation required 60% property owner signatures. I counted twice, 17 signatures from 12 actual properties. Either this neighborhood defied mathematical reality or someone had moonlighted as a forgery artist. My hands shook photographing everything. This wasn't insurance fraud. This was systematic property theft wearing a HOA costume. Back home, I transformed my kitchen table into detective headquarters. Documents spread like evidence at a crime scene. Cross-referencing property sales with HOA dates revealed Karen's true operation scope. 8 years, 5 neighborhoods, identical patterns, form fake HOAs, create expensive emergencies, force out residents who couldn't pay special assessments, buy distressed properties through shell companies, flip to developers for massive profits. I wasn't Karen's victim. I was her final obstacle in a neighborhood she'd systematically conquered through legal terrorism. My phone buzzed, Maria with news that made my coffee taste like liquid regret. Mr. Thornfield, our fraud team found financial records that read like criminal confessions. Her email contained bank statements showing money flowing like polluted rivers. HOA emergency funds to Bradley's LLCs, to Karen's real estate company, to shell companies purchasing distressed properties, to development firms owned by, shocking twist, more Whitfield entities. The money laundering was so obvious, it insulted basic intelligence. Karen had embezzled $2.3 million while hiding behind emergency ordinances and neighborhood safety. But the smoking gun was email correspondence between Karen and Bradley, subject line, Thornfield property acquisition timeline. Getting rid of the farmer becomes priority 1, Karen had typed. His grandfather clause blocks southern development. City planning contact confirms we need clean title before zoning changes. Accelerate timeline before target discovers broader operation, the target. They'd planned my destruction for months, viewing Sarah's death as strategic opportunity. Widowers were easier prey than couples. Their fatal error, forgetting to verify their HOA's legal foundation. Every action against me, assessments, fines, emergency orders, was legally void because the HOA was fraudulently created. I wasn't fighting insurance fraud. I was holding evidence that could invalidate every Willowbrook property transaction for 8 years. Dozens of families had been systematically robbed by people claiming to protect property values. Maria's voice interrupted my revelation. There's more. FBI Financial Crimes wants interviews. This pattern matches investigations across 3 Oregon counties. The Whitfields might be running the state's largest residential fraud operation. That foreclosure notice suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't about stealing my property. It was about silencing the only witness who could destroy their criminal empire. The FBI call came Tuesday while I was nursing coffee that tasted like liquid vengeance. Special Agent Rebecca Torres had a voice like sandpaper, and 20 years hunting white-collar criminals who thought briefcases made them bulletproof. Mr. Thornfield, your orchard connects to a multi-county investigation. We should meet. By afternoon, my living room smelled like fresh legal documents and righteous anger. Torres arrived with a briefcase that clicked open like a trap snapping shut, revealing photographs that made my amateur detective work look like kindergarten art projects. The Whitfields have been federal targets for 3 years, she explained, spreading evidence across my coffee table. Your case gives us jurisdiction to prosecute the entire operation. The scope was breathtaking. Karen and Bradley had systematically pillaged rural communities across Oregon, identical playbooks, manufactured crises, forced sales through financial terrorism. My destroyed orchard was their final mistake. A forensic accountant who could smell money laundering through concrete traced funds through shell companies like following breadcrumbs. Her calculator clicked like machine gun fire. 12.8 million stolen from rural families over 8 years. But financial evidence wasn't enough. We needed neighbors to testify, and Karen had spent years scaring them silent. Mrs. Haven became our unlikely general, organizing clandestine meetings in her kitchen while serving dumplings that somehow made courage contagious. Neighbors shared identical horror stories, mysterious violations, sudden tax increases, threats disguised as helpful suggestions. Karen said my tomato garden violated aesthetic standards, whispered Tom Bradley, no relation to our criminal Bradley. The irony would have been funny if it weren't tragic. Daily fines until I planted approved landscaping. Agnes Miller faced satellite dish persecution. Karen claimed historical district violations. We're not even in a historical district. The woman had apparently confused her own fantasies with actual law. One by one, neighbors found their voices. Karen's dictatorship was crumbling, but federal prosecution demanded overwhelming evidence. My environmental lawyer delivered devastating news for the Whitfields. Those 12 wetland trees carried $50,000 penalties each, plus restoration costs, monitoring fees, punitive damages. Environmental liability alone, $2 million, she calculated with obvious satisfaction. From my firefighting days, I knew environmental violations compound like cancer. Ignore them and they metastasize into budget-destroying lawsuits. Karen's hasty cover-up had multiplied her legal exposure exponentially. The civil rights angle was equally damning. Karen's systematic targeting of rural residents, immigrants, elderly neighbors followed discrimination patterns that federal prosecutors love prosecuting. She picked victims she thought couldn't fight back, my attorney noted. Classic civil rights violation. But our strategic breakthrough came from Jennifer Walsh at Channel 8. Her City Hall sources revealed Bradley's mayoral campaign was bleeding money faster than a severed artery. Internal polling showed him losing by 20 points after my Orchard story aired. He's planning something desperate, Jennifer warned during our secret diner meeting. Coffee cups clinked like conspiracy bells while she shared intelligence. Bradley's accelerating your property seizure before Election Day. Torres coordinated with federal prosecutors to prepare simultaneous warrants. Environmental agencies loaded their legal cannons. Insurance companies compiled fraud evidence spanning multiple states. Our plan was surgical. Let Karen make one final desperate move, then crush her with overwhelming federal response. But first, we protected neighbors brave enough to speak truth. Safe houses, witness protocols, encrypted communications. Torres treated this like organized crime because that's exactly what we were fighting. Documentation is everything, she explained, installing recording equipment in my house. Let them offer their final deal. Get confessions on tape while they think victory's guaranteed. My garage transformed into command center. Surveillance monitors, encrypted phones, evidence files organized like military intelligence. 6 months ago, this space stored garden tools and apple crates. Now it housed a federal investigation. But we planned beyond courtroom victory. This case would establish precedent protecting rural property rights nationwide. Legal groups drafted model legislation based on our evidence. Thursday evening brought electrifying news. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting for Friday night, planning to vote immediate property seizure through eminent domain. Perfect. Let her gather evidence and witnesses in one room. Let her make final plays while federal agents recorded everything. Tomorrow night ends this, Torres promised, her voice carrying federal authorities' full weight. Friday morning delivered Karen's nuclear option, a private investigator whose cologne smelled like desperation mixed with discount aftershave. His badge looked official until you noticed it read licensed security consultant, about as intimidating as a mall cop with delusions. Ezra Thornfield, investigating complaints about illegal agricultural activities. Mind if I poke around? Through my kitchen window, Karen lurked behind curtains like a suburban spy, probably hoping to watch me get arrested for the heinous crime of growing food. The woman's dramatics deserved an Oscar for worst performance by an HOA president. Got a warrant detective discount? I asked, letting 30 years of authority leak into my voice. He mumbled about routine investigation before slinking toward his dented sedan. But I'd caught him dropping something near my compost pile, sleight of hand that would have embarrassed amateur magicians. An hour later, real deputies arrived with drug dogs and expressions suggesting they'd rather be anywhere else. Deputy Martinez, Maria's nephew, who knew this was bullshit, apologized while explaining anonymous tips about suspicious agricultural activities. The dogs beelined for my compost, barking at whatever Karen's bargain basement PI had planted. Martinez's flashlight revealed white powder nestled between coffee grounds and apple peels like the world's most obvious setup. Interesting discovery, Karen materialized like a bad rash, arms crossed in premature triumph. What did you find, officers? But Karen's criminal mastermind status had serious gaps. My security cameras captured everything. Her PI planting evidence, her window surveillance, even her victory march across my lawn. Field testing revealed her drugs were crushed caffeine pills. Apparently, she'd raided a gas station energy supplement aisle for framing materials. Deputy Martinez's body camera recorded Karen's celebration, her arrest demands, her slack-jawed shock when the narcotics tested negative. The woman had confessed to evidence tampering while standing in front of law enforcement. "Ma'am, planting fake evidence carries felony charges," Martinez informed her, maintaining professional composure while Karen's face went hospital sheet white. Weekend brought Karen's financial terrorism blitz that would have impressed cartel accountants. Anonymous IRS complaints about my unreported farm income flooded their hotlines. City inspectors materialized with concerns about unpermitted structures that had existed for decades. Utility companies received false reports about gas leaks and electrical hazards requiring immediate investigation. The coordination was impressive and monumentally stupid. Every complaint traced back to Karen's IP address because criminal masterminds apparently don't understand digital footprints. Woman thought government agencies operated like separate feudal kingdoms instead of interconnected databases. Agent Torres was conducting parallel surveillance, federal equipment recording Karen's self-destruction in real time. "She's unraveling faster than dollar store sweaters," Torres reported during our encrypted call. "Yesterday she offered a building inspector Blazers season tickets for favorable reports. Audio quality is courtroom perfect." Thursday afternoon brought Karen's endgame. Settlement offer delivered via certified mail, thick enough to insulate houses. The proposal was breathtaking in its audacity. I'd sell my property for $1, sign non-disclosure agreements preventing discussion of HOA activities, and relocate outside Oregon within 60 days. In exchange, pending legal actions would disappear, and I'd receive a generous $10,000 relocation allowance. $10,000 for $400,000 property, plus gag orders and exile. Karen's negotiating skills made playground bullies look sophisticated, but she'd included a crucial confession. Given extensive environmental damage from your illegal agricultural activities, this settlement represents significant mercy from the Homeowners Association. Environmental damage from apple farming. Karen had written a confession disguised as a settlement offer, admitting she considered legal agriculture environmentally destructive. Her lawyer should have charged double for drafting criminal evidence. That evening, I called Karen while Torres monitored and recording equipment captured future federal evidence. "Got your settlement offer, Karen? Want to discuss terms?" "Finally showing sense," she sneered, voice dripping premature victory. "My house tomorrow, noon. Bring lawyers and pens for signing. Quick question, why the Friday deadline? What happens if we don't settle?" Her laugh carried pure malice. "City Council has interesting plans for non-cooperative property owners. Bradley's expediting certain municipal processes, code for government corruption that made federal prosecutors salivate like hunting dogs. See you tomorrow, Karen. Should be educational." Oh, Ezra, you have no idea how educational. Truer words were never spoken, just not how she imagined. Friday morning, red and blue lights strobed across my bedroom ceiling like a psychotic Christmas display. 3 patrol cars crowded my driveway while officers hammered my door with the persistence of Jehovah's Witnesses on methamphetamines. "Ezra Thornfield, you're under arrest for assault and battery," announced Sergeant Williams, whose expression suggested he'd rather be home watching cartoons than arresting retirement-age firefighters. The warrant accused me of attacking Karen during yesterday's HOA meeting, a meeting scheduled for tonight at 7 p.m. Karen's desperation had apparently achieved time travel capabilities. "Sergeant, either I'm Doctor Who or your paperwork violates basic physics. That assault happened 6 hours from now." Williams examined the warrant, his weathered face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and resigned irritation. "Orders are orders, Ezra, even the stupid ones." County jail reeked of industrial bleach and shattered dignity. My cellmate Danny was a scarecrow-thin philosopher arrested for public intoxication while homeless. Apparently existing inconveniently was now a municipal offense. "What's your crime, partner?" Danny asked, his breath carrying notes of Ripple wine and poor decisions. "Growing apples without permission." Danny's laughter triggered a coughing fit that echoed off concrete walls. "Jesus, what's next? Breathing violations?" Between his commentary on police state overreach, Danny shared valuable intelligence. He'd worked construction for Bradley's companies until getting stiffed on wages, a pattern spanning years of exploiting immigrant workers, then reporting them for immigration violations when they demanded payment. "Dude's been running that hustle since forever," Danny explained. "Hires crews for city projects, doesn't pay, threatens deportation when they complain. Classic wage theft with a xenophobia chaser." My bail hearing resembled a circus that would have embarrassed actual clowns. Karen arrived with private security claiming death threats from my violent supporters. Her testimony described my escalating aggression and dangerous obsession with her family's safety. Judge Morrison, apparently the county's last honest jurist, studied Karen's complaint with growing disbelief. Miss Whitfield, you're alleging assault that occurred after this warrant was issued. Do you understand how causality works? Her lawyer, a nervous man sweating through expensive suits, mumbled about preemptive protective measures and preventing future violence. The legal theory was so absurd, it violated fundamental principles of space-time. Then Agent Torres entered like federal justice incarnate, marshals flanking her with enough paperwork to clear-cut forests. Your Honor, federal government requests immediate dismissal. Mr. Thornfield is a protected witness in ongoing investigations of municipal corruption, insurance fraud, and civil rights violations. Karen's complexion cycled through rainbow spectrums while her lawyer started perspiring like a marathon runner in Death Valley. Furthermore, Torres continued, voice slicing courtroom air like surgical steel, these charges constitute witness retaliation and federal obstruction of justice. Judge Morrison's gavel struck with coffin nail finality. All charges dismissed. Miss Whitfield, remain available for federal questioning. Freedom tasted like mountain air after cave imprisonment, but drama wasn't finished. Mrs. Haven's emergency text buzzed my phone. Karen at City Council now, voting to steal your land. Started early without public notice. The emergency session was underway when we arrived. Torres and federal agents documenting everything for future prosecutions. Karen commanded the podium, arguing passionately for immediate eminent domain seizure. This dangerous individual repeatedly threatens community welfare, she declared to the sparse audience. His property represents clear and present danger, requiring immediate municipal intervention. Bradley nodded like a dashboard bobblehead while council members prepared voting on seizure ordinances obviously drafted before my arrest. Federal recording equipment captured every incriminating word. Furthermore, Karen built toward crescendo, our investigation reveals environmental violations, tax fraud, and evidence of drug cultivation that authorities shamefully ignore. Drug cultivation. She was publicly repeating debunked lies while federal agents recorded her perjury. Torres stood, credentials glinting under fluorescent glare. Ma'am, you're making false accusations about federal investigations while attempting municipal corruption. Legal counsel might be advisable. Silence, except humming recording equipment capturing Karen's final public implosion. This is harassment, Karen shrieked, composure disintegrating like wet tissue. We're protecting property values from people who don't belong in civilized neighborhoods. There it was, the discrimination driving her crusade, confessed before federal witnesses and recording equipment. Bradley grabbed her arm, whispering about silence and immediate departure. But Karen was beyond rational thought. Years of unchecked power erupting in spectacular self-destruction. We've worked too hard building this community to let some farmer destroy everything. Torres smiled like apex predator scenting prey. Miss Whitfield, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest exercising it immediately. The emergency town hall meeting packed the community center like a powder keg waiting for a spark. National news crews transformed the room into a media circus, their camera lights hot enough to melt makeup and expose lies. The air tasted metallic with tension and the ozone scent of too much electronic equipment in one space. Karen arrived fashionably late with private security that looked like discount Secret Service agents. Her black power suit screamed, definitely innocent of everything, while her smile could have frozen lava flows. The woman's timing was matched only by her complete detachment from reality. Mayor Davidson's gavel cracked like thunder. We're addressing the property dispute between Willowbrook HOA and Mr. Ezra Thornfield. Property dispute, like calling the Titanic a minor shipping incident. I occupied the front row with Agent Torres and enough federal firepower to liberate small nations. Behind me, Mrs. Haven commanded her neighborhood army, voices that had found courage after years of whispered fears. The collective breathing of 300 people sounded like approaching storms. Karen approached the podium with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything. The microphone shrieked feedback when she leaned close. Even the audio equipment was rejecting her presence. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, voice scraping across the room like nails on coffins. We're here because one man's selfishness threatens our community's safety and prosperity. Murmurs rippled through packed chairs. Karen had stuffed the room with supporters, real estate vultures, city contractors, people whose paychecks depended on her corruption. But she'd also awakened genuine neighbors who'd suffered her tyranny in silence. Mr. Thornfield's illegal agricultural activities created fire hazards, environmental destruction, and property devaluation threatening every Willowbrook family. I stood slowly, my movement causing cameras to pivot like predators tracking prey. Karen, since we're discussing illegal activities, explain how you formed an HOA for neighborhoods you didn't live in. Her smile flickered like dying fluorescent bulbs. That's irrelevant to tonight's agenda. Or maybe discuss the $2.3 million your family stole through insurance fraud? The room exploded in whispers that rustled like autumn leaves in hurricane winds. Her supporters shifted uncomfortably while opponents leaned forward like spectators at gladiator death matches. Baseless accusations from a desperate man avoiding accountability, Karen replied, but her voice cracked like ice under blowtorches. Agent Torres rose like federal justice incarnate, credentials gleaming under media spotlights. Actually, Miss Whitfield, those accusations are supported by 18 months of federal evidence collection. Silence except clicking camera shutters and humming recording equipment preserving this moment for legal history. Furthermore, Torres continued, voice slicing tension like surgical blades, we've documented systematic fraud, witness intimidation, environmental crimes, and civil rights violations spanning 8 years of criminal enterprise. Karen's complexion went morgue white. Bradley began slinking toward exits like rats abandoning burning ships. That's when the community center's fire alarm started screaming, triggered by smoke pouring under rear doors. Through windows, orange flames painted the night sky from Willowbrook Estates' direction. Evacuate in orderly fashion, Davidson announced, but chaos drowned his voice as 300 people stampeded toward 2 exits. Outside, the night blazed like Halloween from hell. 5 houses in Karen's pristine development burned simultaneously, flames reaching toward stars that seemed to mock the destruction. Fire sirens wailed like banshees announcing Judgment Day. The irony was biblical. Karen's protected neighborhood, the one she'd saved by destroying my orchard, was burning exactly like she'd claimed my apple trees would. Except my irrigated orchard land remained green and peaceful in the flickering apocalypse. Fire Chief Rodriguez arrived grim-faced. Ezra, these houses have code violations I've never seen outside war zones. Blocked hydrants, illegal wiring, removed fire lanes. It's like someone designed them as death traps. Karen stood paralyzed in the parking lot, watching her empire incinerate while cameras captured her absolute defeat. The woman who destroyed my orchard for fire safety was witnessing her own neighborhood's destruction from her negligent greed. Here's the thing about fire, I told Channel 8's reporter, her microphone thrust toward my face like an accusatory finger. It doesn't give a damn about property values or HOA rules. It just burns whatever's actually dangerous. Behind me, Torres snapped handcuffs on Bradley Whitfield while reciting federal racketeering charges. Karen stood frozen, watching her husband's arrest while her neighborhood burned like scenes from Dante's fever dreams. Miss Whitfield, Torres called over sirens and crackling flames, you're under arrest for federal racketeering, insurance fraud, witness intimidation, and civil rights violations. As handcuffs clicked around Karen's wrists, I delivered the line I'd been saving for months. Turns out the real fire hazard was you, Karen. Should have read your own fire codes. 6 months later, I stood where Karen had torched my heritage apple trees, breathing air that smelled like fresh mulch and vindication instead of diesel smoke and despair. 120 new saplings stretched toward Oregon sunshine, their tender leaves whispering promises Sarah and I had planted decades ago. The federal trials had been swift as executioners' axes. Karen earned 8 years for racketeering, insurance fraud, witness intimidation, and civil rights violations. Bradley received 5 for conspiracy and corruption. Their sentencing hearing overflowed with victims, families whose lives they'd systematically pillaged for McMansion money. Asset forfeiture was biblical in scope. $3.2 million seized from shell companies, plus properties spanning 3 counties. Federal accountants had treated financial justice like archaeological excavation, unearthing every fraudulent penny with scientific precision. My settlement check, $500,000, felt surreal after months surviving on legal bills and righteous anger. But money wasn't the victory. That was watching Mrs. Haven win HOA presidency by landslide margins among neighbors who'd rediscovered their voices. The orchard restoration became neighborhood therapy. Agricultural students from Oregon State provided expertise while locals volunteered weekends transplanting heritage varieties. The new irrigation system featured fire suppression technology that actually protected the community, unlike Karen's paranoid fantasies. These Gravensteins look healthier than my marriage, joked Tom Bradley, the good Bradley, while pruning branches with inexperienced enthusiasm. His humor had returned after years of Karen-induced anxiety. Maybe I should have planted apple trees instead of grass. Professor Martinez from OSU visited monthly, documenting our restoration for research on community agriculture. Your soil composition is perfect for heritage varieties, she observed, soil samples filling jars like evidence of environmental redemption. Land Karen claimed was dangerous was now studied as sustainable farming model. The irony tasted better than fresh apples, but transformation spread beyond property lines. The Willowbrook Property Rights Defense Fund had evolved into a national organization providing legal assistance to families facing HOA fraud. Our case inspired federal legislation protecting agricultural land from spurious homeowner attacks. Congressional testimony felt surreal for someone whose previous public speaking involved fire safety presentations at elementary schools. Senator Williams had insisted my story needed national attention. Your case exposed systematic problems nationwide, she'd explained during hearings. HOAs were designed to maintain standards, not enable organized crime syndicates. Insurance companies implemented fraud detection based on Whitfield investigation patterns. Real estate boards required ethics training after the Karen catastrophe. 3 Oregon counties discovered similar rings pursuing federal prosecution. The Heritage Apple Festival had become Willowbrook's signature celebration, drawing Pacific Northwest visitors for rural resilience and community justice. Proceeds funded legal assistance and agricultural scholarships for sustainable farming students. This year raised $43,000, Mrs. Haven announced during neighborhood meetings. Real meetings with transparent finances and democratic participation. That funds legal help for 4 more families facing fraudulent persecution. Children climbed branches where birds sang songs Karen's chainsaws had silenced. Their laughter echoed across land corrupt officials had tried stealing, proving some victories taste sweeter than heritage fruit. The book advance, When They Burned My Trees Down, How One Firefighter Defeated HOA Corruption, would fund legal clinic expansion and community education programs. Publishers were hungry for rural justice stories, apparently. My phone buzzed with Jennifer Walsh's text. New HOA fraud investigation brewing in Washington County. Interested in consulting? Standing among young trees on crisp October morning, I remembered Sarah's journal words during dark days. These trees will outlast all of us. She'd been prophetic, just not how we'd imagined. The trees had outlasted corruption, schemes, and fraudulent systems built on neighbor exploitation. They'd survived lies, legal terrorism, and arrogant assumptions that money bought immunity from consequences. More importantly, they'd become symbols of community accomplishment when good people stopped tolerating injustice silently. Rebecca Torres, the FBI agent who'd orchestrated federal prosecution, had retired to practice environmental law. Our shared corruption-fighting experience had bloomed into partnership deeper than professional respect. We'd married among apple blossoms that spring, with Mrs. Haven officiating and neighborhood potluck tasting like collective victory. You know what's funny? Rebecca said, evening sunlight filtering through restored orchard canopy. Karen thought destroying your trees would end your story. Instead, she planted accountability seeds sprouting across the entire region. I smiled, watching light dance through leaves that would feed families and shade generations of unborn children. Karen had tried destroying one man's orchard. Instead, she'd cultivated justice movements that were bearing fruit in communities she'd never imagined touching. The story was expanding, not ending. But for the first time in years, I was eager for the next chapter. What's your worst HOA horror story? Drop your nightmare in the comments. I read every single one, and your experience might help families fighting similar battles. Hit subscribe for more David versus Goliath justice stories, and smash that bell for notifications when corruption gets crushed. Sometimes good guys actually win.